What do you want to do in the future? Since a young age, I have gotten this question a lot. Coming from a business family, though my parents never explicitly told me that I should learn or do business in the future, I have always sensed this expectation. Whether it be my dad brings me to one or two of his business dinners, or my mom telling me about how her funds are working. However, when I'm away, in fact, all the way across the Pacific Ocean in the US, I was free to choose my activities, and then I found out that I was really into international relations, and I was into helping people. So that I will always tell people I want to work in the UN in the future. One time my mom goes, "But why?" So I chuckled and asked my mom, "Why not, Mom? The UN is helping people who are underprivileged in the poor area. And even I just volunteer, I can make the world better by just helping them." However, what my mom later said changed the totality of my mindset. She did a simple math. Perhaps this is how Asians become good at math. Anyways, she was saying that if you were just a volunteer working in an African village for 20 years, how many people do you think you can really impact? I didn't say anything because I did not think what my mom just said could change my mindset about what I'm going to do in the future. So then, of course, she wasn't implying that this type of volunteering wasn't necessary. But however, she wanted to show me that how I could take a different route towards the same goal by impacting more lives. So my mom continued, "I'm sure you will help people, but maybe not as many as you would like to because of the limited resource you would have. Think about Bill Gates. With his resources, he would have donated $20 billion to agricultural development, emergency relief, global libraries, education, health, urban poverty. He is making the impact, millions of lives." So my mom made a valid point there. If my goal is to make the world better and help as many people as possible, there could be a difference for the route I would take. I was 15, so I let that thought sink in as I continued to explore life. My mind about money was changing though. I used to think that when businesses are trying to do good, it's always conflicted with their goal of maximizing their profit. By increasing the environmental costs, paying high wages to workers, all these things, increasing the cost, reducing the profit. However, after researching and observing, I realized that the ability for business to do good is in fact so huge, both for the society and themselves. So when we think about good societal impacts, we often think about nonprofits, charity donations. Of course, they play an important role in the society we live in today. However, they do not have the framework to solve the biggest problems we have today. They're the first programs to be cut out, as when individuals themselves are not doing well financially, they can lose their power and will to donate. Or even they have the strong will and are giving all that they have to donate. It just shows that they do not have the framework. Last year, statistics shown that the donations from charity donations or nonprofits was around $200 billion. In contrast of $3.7 trillion that the businesses are giving to the world. To drive solutions for the biggest problems we encounter today in the world, we need trillions, not just billions. Now we have seen the power of business doing good. Let's talk about the ethics of business doing good. And let's talk about why these big corporates have a social responsibility to give back to the society. The first reason is rather simple. Without the community, there is no business. And we have seen that the actions of business doing good can drive solutions to allow good ethics. Whether it's the post-Charlevoix dialogue on racial equality, the immigration law changes that will impact the dreamers, or the Paris Climate Change Accord that will impact the environment, we see today's business leaders are involved in a vigorous and informed way to align their social progress with their core business interest. We see that in the recent hurricane relief, the famous beer company Budweiser are filling up their beer cans with water and delivering them to the area that had a water drinking shortage. And we see that the more recent example being that Delta and United Airlines have drawn off their partnership with NRA to support the gun law reform. This is great for the social cause, but the businessmen might stand aside. What about the company's profit? What about the total shareholder returns? Well, within the same example, when Delta and United Airlines, they're doing this good and they're drawing out their membership from NRA, they're losing their profit that they're used to earn. This is true in one way. So within the traditional view, they are reducing their profit. They are hurting their goal of maximizing their profit. However, this is rather short term. Let's look at another example that we can see the long-term effects of a business that's doing good. So let's say it's a chocolate company. We all love chocolate here. And this company, to do some good, they decided to partner up with some non-governmental organizations, and they decided to pay high wages to the farmers who are producing cocoa. So within the traditional view, people might think that, oh, they're doing good, increasing their profit, reducing the cost, and eventually they will lose to their competitors' lower price. Well, check under your chairs. So the chocolate bar you're holding right now is from Mars. This is the company I was talking about. This is the company that is the 6th largest private company that is doing good while doing well. Unlike their competitors, you're welcome to eat them, by the way. Unlike their competitors, they have this sustainable supply of cocoa. And by their partnerships with these NGOs and their small shareholder farmers, in turn, these NGOs also help the farmers to improve their crop yields, to get a fair, premium, livable wage, and address any human rights issues along the supply chain, and minimize the harmful effects to the environment like deforestation. So this is good for the farming community, the environment, and Mars themselves, who benefited from attracting customers and reducing a significant amount of risk of losing the sustainable cocoa supply. So besides Mark's success story, numerous speeches and report a positive association between socially responsible initiatives and economic success. In nowadays, the corporate giving programs, they provide a competitive advantage when they're well-designed and carefully executed. They increase the name recognition, the brand reputation among their consumers. For example, when Blake Mycoskie founded Tom's in 2006, it was after a visit to Argentina, where he saw these little kids running around, happily, but without shoes on them. But then later he learned the sad fact that these are the kids who are getting injured and sick every year because they did not have shoes to wear. To combat this, Blake came back and then started a company called Tom's, a shoe business that will donate 1 pair of their shoes for every pair that is bought. So far, the company has donated more than 1 million pair of shoes, which also means that they have sold more than 1 million pair of shoes. So this example, of course, exemplifies the fact that the business is doing well. And it shows that consumers love business when they're doing good. They feel as if they're also contributing to something. They're behind these social costs with the business. They're also driving solutions to change the world. But at the same time, they're also getting something that they would enjoy. So not only does doing good in business will benefit the society, it also benefits the business themselves by attracting more consumers. Or let's look at another example of what Airbnb did when earthquakes and crises happen. Airbnb provided free housing to crisis survivors and relief workers. This is a great program, not only for the people who were in need of housing during that time, but also a great platform for the people who wanted to help but did not know how. Well, they're doing this free thing again, and people might be skeptical. Okay, they're increasing their costs and then reducing their profit. However, looking for another perspective, we're seeing Mars actually growing throughout this period of time. They're growing by increasing their base of customers, whether it's the host or their guest. So you can see that focusing only on the profit is not a comprehensive way of evaluating when a business is doing good. if I have not convinced everyone sitting here today that an ethical mindset is the way to go, and it creates more value for the business, with all these awesome, to me, mind-blowing examples, let me share a personal story with you about what I gained so much from doing some good for free. So it was last year, I was watching the TV, and on this local news channel, it was about a Syrian man. He was a refugee and just moved into Toledo a few days ago. He was making falafels happily at his new US home. But then later, the camera switched to a thing of his interview. And then he started talking about, what Syrian food meant for him when he's in the US, all the way far from his country. That moment was emotional. To me, someone born from the US myself, I related to that. I missed my food, my culture all the time. However, I had more sympathy for him because for me, I can go back to China and enjoy Chinese food every summer. But for him, it was a place that is war-torn. It was a place that he could not return to safely in a short amount of time. So I wanted to help him somehow with his new life in the US. And I reached out to these local nonprofit organizations that was for refugees to see if I can actually find him, from seeing him on TV to find an actual person. And it turned out that I actually found him. And we met, and we discussed about everything. And I learned that he was a chef in Syria before. That's why probably he was making falafels. And he used to also own a restaurant in Egypt, even when he was fleeing. So cooking has been his passion. So we had this idea kind of about opening a restaurant in Toledo. And then Ghassan, his name is Ghassan, by the way, he was really excited about the idea. And then he wanted to deliver happiness through his authentic Syrian food. However, I knew that he couldn't be able to afford this to a business company that will help him with the startup. So I used my internship opportunity with a local business growth company to learn about the business campaign as well as writing a business plan so I can do one for Ghassan. It was all exciting for me at first, but then it started to require more time to research. I've never opened a restaurant before, and then I have to do all that and explain to Ghassan too. And it was difficult for me to filling out all the forms after I have learned out that Ghassan was only holding a Syrian refugee ID instead of a citizenship. And even out of all, the communication was a problem for us. I did not speak any Arabic, and he did not speak English. So even every time when we were just doing the bare communications, we need a third interpreter to help us. However, after 3 weeks of hard work, when I saw Ghassan holding that business plan really happily, I could almost see him standing in front of his own restaurant one day, holding a plate of falafels, and now ready to deliver that to his customers. And that moment was life-changing, not only for Ghassan, but for me too. Because meeting Ghassan let me understand that the society we live in today treats people with different identities differently. Meeting him made me realize that for people who lack the access to education and opportunities, the power to change their lives lies within their cultural heritage. Meeting him opened my eyes of how business can solve problems. So I guess thanks to my mom's advice, otherwise I would probably be delivering government supply food as a volunteer to Ghassan for many years. Instead of him, maybe one day he will own his restaurant and become self-financially stable. And in the future, this restaurant is not just for Ghassan. It opens doors for other refugees who also move into the US, and it opens doors for people who need a job. So if something that small I did could impact someone that much, I'm ecstatic to think about what the world will become when all business owners come together and start making impacts. And I believe that some of you sitting here today already is, or you're on your way to, hopefully after today's talk, to become one of them, to come together to change the world. Thank you.